sit-down interview, right?
Absolutely. So we're here in the Hill Department, second floor. Do I have your permission to use this on an ONU website or for educational use?
Yes.
Okay. It is about 12:40 on the
15th?
December 15th. I guess start off with state your name and position.
Dr. Robert Alexander. I'm the professor of political science and the chair of the Department of History, Political Science, and Geography.
All right. Yeah, new name now, so we gotta.
That's right.
Has that been any problem trying to remember or switch over, or is it?
HPG's been real easy to hit
Yeah.
rather than HPJ, but Dr. Crawford likes to sneak the S in there
Yeah.
every once in a while. So.
Yeah, that's what he's kind of. Yeah, he's talked about that. How long have you been at ONU?
I've been here since 2002. It's my second tour of duty. I was an undergraduate here from 1990 to 1994.
Awesome. And you studied political science, obviously.
I was a political science major and then backed into a history minor in my last semester, or quarter, I guess, back then. It was like I needed one more class, and I was like, okay, I'll do that too.
Yeah. Why did you decide to come here for teaching?
I had a 1-year position at Bowling Green State University, and then I went down to Frostburg, Maryland, and I had a tenure track position there. When this position opened up, Dave Sappel was here, and I kind of had my eye on it. Most of my family's from the area. At the time, we had 2 very young children. My mother and father both had some health issues, very close to the family, that kind of thing. And so when this position opened up, it was the only one that I applied for, and was fortunate enough to get hired. And so I kind of chose to come back here. It wasn't necessarily the only place that offered me a job, because sometimes, in academia it's hard to choose where you're going to end up. Somebody offers you a position, you take it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only, when I was applying for jobs in earnest, it can be depressing if you say there's like 100 jobs in the world that you actually are qualified to do, and there's hundreds of applicants for each one of those positions. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to choose to come back to ONU.
What do you remember about the interview process when you came back for that?
I remember I did feel comfortable, which isn't normal on a lot of job interviews. It was a bit surreal. I remember also feeling like members of the department that were here when I was here didn't treat me like I was a student or anything like that. Enough time, I think, had passed that it didn't feel like I was not equal to people. So there was that. So yeah, it was a good experience. I remember one of the questions from Andy Ludani. He had asked me, I've seen that you've moved around quite a bit, and I had moved around because I had a 1-year position at Bowling Green, and then the position in Frostburg, and then when this position opened up. So I found it peculiar, like I'm not a mover. I'm not trying to get from place to place. So yeah, that was good. And I also remember that there was kind of some. And now I can totally see it, some possessiveness from some of the students about Dr. Saffel. Like they definitely were sad that he was leaving, and like nobody's going to be able to replace Dr. Saffel. You could get that feeling from them, like, who do you think you are? So I remember that, and that was a little intimidating. So the students were probably the most intimidating part of the interview process.
Gotcha. How was the department when you first started teaching here compared to now? Like different colleagues, I guess.
It's we've undergone a lot of change in the last 15, 16 years. So obviously we had criminal justice was a major part of the department. Dr. Ludani was still teaching here. Most of the people that were here when I was a student were still here. There was another colleague, Steve Moore, who was doing a lot of the social studies at the time, and he was a younger member of the department, and so he was here and was very active. So yeah, it was. I mean, in many ways the things haven't changed,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because the same mission of the department is it's always been the same thing, and student focused, student centric, all that kind of thing. Um, Probably a little bit more scholarly activities happening now, and clearly in the last couple of years we have a real burst of youth
Yeah.
in the department. So that's been exciting to see.
Yeah. What was the name of the department when you first started?
I think it was. It's kind of funny because I've watched some of these, and
Yeah.
people are wrong. It was it was history, political science, and criminal justice.
Oh, okay.
It was the name of the department, and the history, politics, and justice happened maybe in the mid 2000s. I'm gonna say like 2008 or something
Oh,
like
okay.
that. And I think that, you know, I remember having that conversation with people, and it's kind of funny because you can even get into, when we just renamed it again, you know, get into the conversation of politics or political science. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some real things there that you could be either missing or not, but we're trying to get the kind of the worth and the, you know, what we're really about.
Yeah.
With the name, the history, politics, and justice. I remember one of the reasons that people liked that was it almost sounded superhero-esque. You know, history, politics, and justice. So
You're the head of the political science and you're head of the department. As a political scientist, does it matter to you politics or political science?
because we're a blended department,
Yeah.
the politics isn't so bad. But the political science, so like, or government might be something
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, you see that like in steeped kind of elite universities, like a
Right.
department of government, which could kind of go in different directions, history and
Yeah.
political science and whatnot. But I think the political science definitely gives a bit more homage to the science piece of
Right.
political science. So kind of the statistics and the
Not
you
just
know.
yeah. Gotcha. When you first started, what courses did you teach?
I'll tell you, I don't have much sympathy for university faculty that complain about preps and that kind of thing, because we were on quarters at the time, and so it was a 3-3-3 load, and not only was it a 3-3-3 load, it was a 3-3-3 load with 4 credit hour classes. So we were essentially cramming in almost a semester's worth of work, 40 hours of coursework into 10 weeks. So it was a pretty grueling schedule for a professor.
Mhm.
I'll say that, you know,
Yeah.
it's not the salt mines. And so I actually taught like 7 different preparations in the first couple of years. So of my 9 classes, I only had a couple that were repeats. And usually you want to be able to have a couple repeats so you have fewer preparations. So I was teaching intro to American. We had an intro to political science class at the time. So I taught that. I taught American politics, state and local politics, mass media and politics.
Yeah.
A lot of the same things I'm teaching today. But that intro to poli-sci class was one that is kind of fallen off the books. We tried to streamline the curriculum, but presidency, pop culture, some of those kinds of classes, and it's been fun to teach those. Public administration was something
Yeah.
I taught a lot of earlier in my career as well.
How have your personal course offerings changed? Have you seen yourself kind of being able to get into a better personal favorites for classes, or be able to create some classes, I guess?
So throughout much of the first part of my career, so Dr. Scott, when she was here, she would have been the other Americanist teaching in political science, but she was devoting a lot of time to criminal justice. So she wasn't able to offer very many classes in Intro to American Politics. She hardly did at all until I became chair during the time that I was here. So I was teaching a lot of almost everything in American politics. And while that was fun, I felt like it was not necessarily the best thing for students to get necessarily a political science degree in Dr. Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wanted them to kind of get a little bit more of reach. And so when Dr. Scott retired, it was a conscious decision to say, let's not necessarily try and replace Dr. Scott with Dr. Scott, but try and get somebody who's an Americanist who can also do some public policy. So we kind of wanted to branch out in that direction. And fortunately, we've been able to bring in Dr. Howe and now Dr. Sparks for a
Yeah.
year, and now we've got another faculty member coming in who will be able to offer more of a range of classes in American politics. So I know it's not necessarily answering your question, but
Yeah.
I was kind of required to teach almost everything in American. And I don't think that's necessarily the healthiest thing for students. Myself, I've enjoyed teaching campaigns and elections. I love teaching that. Pop culture, war and film, I've really enjoyed teaching that class. The film and politics. The intro to American class, one of the things, since I've become chair, I don't teach that class very frequently. And I'm kind of bummed about that because that's a class where you get a lot of resistance from students, where it's like, I hate politics. I dare you to teach me something. You know, I already know this. You get just kind of resistance. And so I kind of enjoy hopefully getting students to think about it in a different way and maybe getting a little bit more excited about it. So interestingly, I like teaching that intro class, but I haven't been able to offer it as much as the chair.
From your personal experience, do you prefer quarters or
semesters all day long? In fact, so you're doing digital history, so a little piece of history for to go on the record is that when there was actually a pretty major debate about whether or not we should have semesters or quarters, and many were not, wanting to move towards semesters, and I was asked to actually serve as a faculty voice to argue for semesters. And so we actually, at a university-wide faculty meeting, had a debate, a bona fide debate on quarters and semesters, and I was the pro-semesters faculty member arguing with an engineering colleague who was talking about quarters. And I probably didn't realize at the time, I could have been putting a target on my back. I don't know if I was tenured at the time, but I was probably putting a target on my back. But I thought this was the right thing for students and certainly the right thing for faculty. You were just rushing through a lot of stuff. It was quite a grind under quarters. And our quarter system was especially bad because we would go, so we'd start around Labor Day, get that first quarter done, start the winter quarter, go for 3 weeks, and then have the week of Thanksgiving off. No, is that right? No. We would finish up the week before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving would be a week off, and I say off.
Yeah. Because
you'd actually be preparing your courses for the winter quarter. So you weren't done. You had just finished grading for the fall quarter. During Thanksgiving week, you're traveling, you're trying to do all that kind of stuff. But then what you have is the next quarter, 3 more preparations, whatever. You go back for 3 weeks. And if you're teaching quarters, you're probably doing a lot of things where you're given them three tests throughout, right? And you would have these three tests. Well, most of them would happen right before Christmas break. So students had kind of a mini finals week right before Christmas break. You'd have 2 weeks off. You'd come back. You'd be in your 4th week of the quarter, and students would have no idea who you are. You didn't remember who they were. It had been a while. So you have this, Dr. Lomax used to refer to as an abortion of a winter quarter. So it was interrupted. It was just ridiculous. So it was bad.
Yeah. Okay. Have the students changed since you first started teaching?
Let's see here. Generally speaking, no. I have enjoyed having students in the classroom this whole time, and they're very strong writers, generally speaking, and very sharp. You can do a lot of things with the students that you get here. Probably one of the things that I have observed is, and I think that this is true in a lot of industry as well. I've talked to my sister about this. I've talked to other people about it. Is that a lot of what people put worth on has changed a bit. I think so. If I were to have turned a paper in late to a professor, I would have been almost in tears as a man. Like, oh my God, and now it's like students will just hand me something late, or they'll say, I'm going to get this in late. You can dock me whatever you want to dock me. Whereas in the syllabus, it might literally say, no late papers accepted. And they just kind of don't care. And that worries me a little bit about kind of work ethic moving forward, because, you know, I'm not going to say that college isn't hard and all that kind of stuff, because it is, and it's
Right.
like that. But the consequences are far more stark for students when they get out of here and they don't get an assignment in when their boss wants their assignment in or whatever. So I try and maintain, like, listen, sorry, that's not going to work, that kind of thing. So not that it didn't happen 20 years ago when I
Right.
started, it did, but the frequency of it has occurred in greater occurrence in recent years, and that's been kind of a weird thing to observe. And I know I'm not the only one that has seen that, but I think that also speaks to kind of what's important to people, generally speaking. Like, even I think faculty members are putting more worth in themselves than necessarily the job, and that's true, I think, outside of academia as well. That, you know, a job doesn't define who you are. An assignment doesn't define who you are. I think that there's kind of something deeper going on in the culture
Yeah.
that speaks to that. But that maybe that's a paper for somebody to write.
How have the majors changed since you got here?
Do you mean like the curriculum or
The majors,
students?
the actual like majors that people are pursuing.
So one of the first things that I did when I was brought in was I was asked to, as I actually went through and changed a lot of the curriculum, tried to modernize it to what I had just gotten through in graduate school, and that pretty much, you know, happened for about 10 years. And then we also brought in some outside people. My first year as chair, I asked to get external reviews for the department to help us figure out, you know, where we were and where we wanted to be. And I think that was something that was I was trying to get out ahead of things, because we knew we were going to have some retirements, and we wanted to kind of see, like, what can we do to strengthen the department. And the public policy was something that stemmed from that. And so we had some tracks in American politics or international politics, and we kind of found that maybe those weren't as useful for students and a little messier to kind of complete those things than if we just simply said, let's have a minor in international studies and a minor in public policy. So if you really want to kind of get into those areas, you can do that and kind of tighten that poli-sci curriculum. And so we did that. That was one thing that flowed from the external reviews, and I think it's been useful. I would like to see more students outside of our department pick up public policy.
Yeah.
We think that that's something that should be able to be really beneficial for students in education, students in engineering, students in pharmacy and business. I mean, everything's public
Yeah.
policy in some way. So, but that's been one of the changes that we've done. There's a PPE curriculum as well now, philosophy, politics, and economics. We get some kind of back and forth with that. General education is the other part that, as far as the curriculum goes, it's not necessarily with the major, but it has been a negative. It's had a negative result for us, because we're not seeing as many students from outside of Hill Building populate our courses for whatever reason. But one of them is because they don't have to. And I think that that's troubling, given the importance of civics in the country and in the world. So hopefully we'll see more of those. We've been able to kind of come back around on that, particularly the international and comparative classes.
Yeah.
But the American politics, I don't know how every time we offer those courses, they're not just, you know, busting at the seams.
Yeah. What would you say the biggest difference that the department, like when you started to now, as far as the department's role in gen eds with the whole campus, how has that been changed?
I feel like we've been shut out of a lot of things. I think that curriculum has increased in certain areas at the expense of taking classes in history and political science. The Western civilization used to be core classes that people across the university would take. They're not anymore. To pharmacy's credit, they still require them to take some Western or World Civ. But the American politics, you're not seeing that, or international politics, you're not seeing that as much. And I just, again, kind of feel like, you know, I think as enrollments, and this is probably something else that's, you know, uh, significant at this time period,
Mm-hmm.
is that, you know, when I first got here, enrollments were very strong. They were strong for across the university. They were strong in the department, and they're not as strong today. And I think under that pressure, a lot of majors have sought to try and keep students to themselves. Business is a big, it's guilty of this,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And so, you know, they, especially under the old general education program, they were getting a lot of general education courses fulfilled inside the business college and not necessarily out amongst the classes that they ought to have been taking. We thought we had a good win when one of the learning outcomes was civics or ethics, but what it turns out is that engineering requires ethics, business requires ethics, pharmacy requires ethics. So we're not seeing any of those students anyway. And that's, again, I think to their detriment, but also to our detriment, because it used to be we got a lot of our great majors not from off the street, but that said, you know what, I don't want to do pharmacy, I want to do law.
Right.
And if they're not in those intro courses, they don't even know that this is something that they might be interested in. So I miss that part of it. And I think it's, again, a problem for students, because I think it doesn't help them maybe find another spot to land, because when you're 18 years old, you're not exactly sure what you want to be when you
so
grow
many
up.
different options.
Right.
If you never take anything, if you never really experience it, it's going to be hard to find out if that's what you want to do. You know.
And so many majors they want you to just get into it right now, right? And now that's another huge change that's occurred in education, is so many classes are being offered, college credit classes are being offered in high schools, or as, you know, relationship classes.
Right.
And so you're seeing students come in with almost all their general education coursework done.
So they just go straight into their
vocation. It's almost like vocational school.
Right.
And again, you know, all of those general education classes should really be kind of foundational classes. And if you don't share the common foundation, you know, we're speaking different languages to one another. And I think that's troublesome.
Kind of cuts into the kind of presence that we have at ONU for the liberal arts kind of education that we have sort of set for ourselves in the past. So
well, to that point, Dan, when I got out of here, I thought I went to a liberal arts college, university. And it wasn't until I went to other universities that I realized, and then came back, that I realized I really didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, we do like to say that we're a liberal arts institution, but what we really are these professional colleges with some liberal arts thrown in. If you're an arts and sciences major, I feel like you really do feel like you're getting a liberal arts education, because you're taking classes from these different areas. But that's not necessarily the case. Engineering might only have like 5 electives.
Yeah.
And students can take.
Pharmacy and engineering have a pretty strict schedule for them. They don't really get too much of the different gen eds compared to a lot of other programs, I feel like.
Right. And that's again something I didn't really recognize until I was out of here and kind of came back and was like, oh, this isn't the liberal arts place that I thought that it was.
Right. You talked about when you first got here, the enrollment and everything was pretty high, and it seemed that everything was running pretty smoothly before the economic downturn of 2008. How have things changed because of that 2008, the recession and everything, as far as education?
Well, during the glory days, right? During the glory days, it was kind of funny. Like, so my children, when I came back here, my oldest daughter was like 3, and my middle was 2. And so when I came back here, and we'd have Christmas parties, they would have Kinghorn. Essentially would just be loaded with food, shrimp cocktail, anything you wanted, right? I mean, it was just falling from the sky. And they would have like a Santa's workshop back there, and kids would go back there and hunt for gifts for their parents. And, you know, I've got coffee mugs from way back then, you know, and my kids would be so pleased. And then Santa would come in on a sleigh, and it was just a magical event, and that's when that's when things were going great. We don't have that anymore. I don't know if Santa's had a sighting on campus or not, but so like a lot of those kinds of things you don't see as much anymore. Um, Another big change that it's occurred, and this isn't necessarily the recession, but um, is are the number of people that live in Ada as opposed to other places, and I
Right.
think that has an effect. But I think more of that, like I was alluding to before, kind of a. I don't want to go too far with the Hobbesian, all against all
Mm-hmm.
metaphor, but I think that a lot of places are looking inward and not necessarily real places, departments, rather than saying, "Hey, we're all in this together." And I can understand why that might be the impulse, but I think that there's not as much sharing that could be going on, um, because I think people are a little fearful to make sure that they get theirs. So I think that that's a piece, but curriculum wise, we've been able to offer the same kinds of things that we've always been able to offer. We have been able to replace faculty members, which has been great. We've been able to add different types of faculty members. So, from that perspective, it hasn't changed so much. The sheer number of students has been, I remember when we had to change a classroom because we didn't have enough enough seats in the classroom for our orientation class. And we had like 45, 50 kids in the orientation class. That was amazing, and then when criminal justice left, that took half of the majors in the department with it. And it was a big major for us. So I remember the following year was my first year as chair. I had nothing to do with any of that. And I'm looking out and we had like 11 students in the orientation class. And it was depressing.
Yeah.
And so kind of it's just been like a constant fight whereas before it was like students just showed up, and now it's like we got to go out there and get students, and we got to go out there and get great students like we always have. And it's been more of a challenge for a lot of different reasons. But fortunately, the ones that come are pretty strong, so that's good.
Yeah. Have you been able to be a part of any, initiating any new programs on campus, any new groups? Have you been fortunate enough to start anything?
I think that, like I said, realigning the curriculum, having the public policy minor. We had an international studies major years ago, and that kind of died shortly after Dr. Ludani left because of there was a real move to streamline curriculum. We did bring the international studies minor back, so I'm happy that we've been able to do that. We have changed the way that we do the senior thesis in the department by trying to have a class around it. We still need to work on that. It's not working the way that I would like to see it operate. So those have been some of the curriculum kinds of things that I've had a part in. I think the Washington Center, I think it's grown a lot under my leadership. Hopefully, we've gone to a lot of these conventions as part of the experience that a lot of students get. So that's been big. I think that, and I'm not the only one that does this, but working with students on research and taking them to conferences, and a lot of people are doing that now. That's something that's very different from when I was a student. I mean, conference. I didn't do my first conference paper until I had my master's in hand. So the fact that undergraduates are doing that now is huge. So yeah, I mean, those would be some of the things that I've done since I've been here. Pi Sigma Alpha has been the other one that we won a number of outstanding chapter awards from the national office. I sit on the national office's executive board now. When I first came here, when you ask me about your first experiences on campus and whatnot, most honor societies, it was like you go in, you pay your dues, and you get your whatever, and then you go on and put on your resume. And when I got here, it's kind of funny. I might even have it right here. Yeah, when I got here, I had this little book here, the chapter advisor handbook, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that they actually could do stuff. And I saw that there was money involved, and students could get money, scholarships, and that kind of stuff. So we since then have gotten $15,000-$20,000 in external grants to do lots of different things, research, bring in speakers, have film and lecture series, all kinds of things. And that's, I think, really helped enliven what political science majors can do. And we generally look at everything as kind of a big happy family to history, poli-sci, social studies, geography. So that's all been big. And then of course, picnics and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff has been fun. Election parties and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. You talked about the Washington Center. What do you think? How do you feel the role of the Washington Center internships have played on a lot of the students in the department?
If you were to go through, I mean, I've never had a student come back and say that was the dumbest thing I ever did. Ada is small, and for a lot of students, they're not ready for a Washington, D.C. experience at 18 years old, and that's why they ended up at Ohio Northern in the first place. And now, pretty much one of the things I tell almost any student when they come here is, you've got 8 semesters, spend 1 semester somewhere else. I don't care if it's a study abroad, I don't care if it's D.C., go somewhere else to kind of set yourself apart from everyone. And I think that a lot of our students take us up on that. A lot of our students, I think, come in here with that mindset, thinking when they hear about it, I want to do that. And they do it. And the effects of it are immediate, but also delayed. So, like, it can be transformative while you're there. Just the surviving DC is a big piece of it, but also seeing, like, so this is what you can do with a history degree, or this is what you can do with a poli-sci degree. That you don't, because you're not going to work at the poli-sci factory, right? What do I do with this if I don't go to law school? There's thousands of jobs that you can do, and getting out there and seeing what other people have done is a huge piece to help you, put the puzzle together. So I think it's been crazy beneficial for our students. It's been fun to be able to watch students grow from those experiences. We have a lot of students that end up staying in DC. So we have a good alumni base in DC right now, and most of those students, or a lot of those students I know, did Washington Center internships. So it's nice to see that. It's nice to see, like, when they come in and they're thinking about it, and you take them through the process, and then when you go visit them, there they are, like, so comfortable, and you're like, wow, they did it. I don't know if I could have done that at 20 years old, but
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like getting that many people over there, as far as staying in Washington D.C., probably helps a lot, as validating our department, as if anybody coming through D.C. in the future, kind of giving ourselves a little bit more of a name on the map for Ohio Northern political science.
I think that speaks to a couple of things. One, I think that's why we try and push you really hard here, so that when you go out there, people know, like, that's an ONU degree, that means something. The second piece of that is that polar bears will do about anything for another polar bear, because they know, like, we're not the Ohio State University, so we don't have that name recognition. So, like, if you're in DC or you're heading to DC, I've had plenty of alumni say, hey, do you have anybody coming? And I'll let them know, and they've hired some of our students for internships and full-time jobs. So that's been a nice piece of the connection as well from that particular program.
Okay. All right. So a little bit of a change of pace in the kind of memory of Miss Dr. Lomax leaving. Should one take a course from the L's?
It's funny. I didn't even know that existed when I was a student. Okay, that there was a don't take a class from the L's, Lomax, Lodani, Laughlin. Once I found that out as a faculty member, I threatened to drop the A in my name, because I was like, I want to be that notorious, So yeah, of course, absolutely. I never had Dr. Lomax as a student. When he was my advisor for some reason. And I remember he knew I was thinking about going to law school at the time. He was like, you need to take ballroom dancing. It's like thinking, there's no way I'm going to take bowling, No, you should take golf or ballroom dancing. Anybody that's going to be a lawyer should know how to do those kinds of things. I didn't take his advice. So I never had him in class, but yeah, he's notorious for, I think, the right reasons.
Yeah.
Dr. Laughlin, I had him in class as a student. I loved him. I absolutely loved him. I thought he was sharp, smart. I would sit there with several of my student colleagues, and we would write down words that we'd never heard before, because he would just come out with these words and you'd be like, I don't know what that means. And we'd then go and look them up after class and we'd have a laugh about it. But, it was, he pushed you in some different ways. And then Dr. Ludani was just, I remember him telling us that he didn't have a television and it was by choice. And I was like, this man is my hero, I mean, who does that? But he was another one that extraordinarily sharp, smart, all that, but had this kind of sense of humor about him that, if you're paying close attention, you'd hear these things. So, yes, if students didn't take a class in the L's, they missed out.
Yeah, I'm sure Dr. Laughlin's sharpness was put on display in his dictionary-sized book he just published.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
That book is more than I've published in all 4 books. So yeah.
Yeah, he's got a lot going on. With all the turnover, you talked about like the new faces that we're seeing in the department right now. With all of the turnover in faculty, have there been any expectation changes for tenure or promotions over the years?
I think we've tried to be more clear about what it is. I remember you asked about the interview, and I remember Dr. Ellen Wilson saying, well, we expect you to publish something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, but that doesn't tell me a lot. Something could be multiple things. Does it matter what kind of a journal or an article or a book? So it was, I think, a little bit more flexible or open maybe then. So we have tried to establish more clear standards in the department. Frankly, when I was coming out, I had one publication as a graduate student in a very good journal, and that was big. That did separate me from a lot of other grad students coming out. Today, we just went through a search. We had over 100 applicants, and almost all of them had one thing published, if not 2 or 3 things published. So the expectation, not only as a faculty member, but it's already kind of moved to graduate students. So today they're all getting stuff published in grad school. So we do have a standard in the department. I don't foresee faculty, not able to hit that standard. I think that the expectations are higher as far as publications, but I'll also add that if you take a look at our most senior members of the department, they're all publishing. It's not like they just go to seed. They, like you said, Dr. Laughlin just published a tome.
Yeah.
Dr. Lomax has published a couple articles in recent years.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Waters wrote his book on Cold War. Dr. Crawford's taken a semester off for his research with women's football, and
they don't have to.
Yeah.
They don't. They're doing this because they like to do it. They enjoy it. It's stimulating to them. This is not a publish or perish place, but people are really active. The new faculty that we have there, Dr. Coe is just a machine.
Mm-hmm.
She's just killing it. Dr. Rossler has a fascinating research agenda, and she's trying to build geography, kind of from the ground up. Yeah. And she's doing a fantastic job with that. So there's a lot of expectations to do a lot of different types of things, and that can make it difficult for some people. You have to have the right person in this kind of a place where you can be a handholder for a student, but you can also push them. You are doing research, international research one day, and then you're talking to the local newspaper the next day. You don't know what you're talking to a prospective student. I mean, you are a jack or a Jill of all trades
right
here.
Definitely raises the expectations and kind of the work ethic of everybody around when it's not necessarily just enough to publish one thing. Everybody's publishing. It kind of pushes everybody in the right direction. Well,
and it's not like professors just go in and teach and walk out the door.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's something. That's kind of a. I think people out there have no idea what professors actually do. And again, it's not the salt mines, but you never are off the clock either as a professor. You're always thinking about something. And you're always working on something in your mind. Most people, the people in this department are definitely like that.
Right.
Are there some bad ones out there? I'm sure that there are, but they're not here.
All right. We're going to end this with some memories. So, do you have any specific or favorite memories about any colleagues in the past or present that come to mind?
Oh man. So obviously Dr. Ellen Wilson. If there was a stray Diet Coke can, that would be her. Diet Pepsi, stray Diet Pepsi can, that would be her. Uh, you would have conversations with her, and sometimes I would have to just stop and say, "Okay, exactly what are you saying right now?" Because she was just always, moving. She was a moving target that couldn't be hit. So that's kind of a general memory about her. Dave Saffel, he wasn't my colleague, but as a professor, I remember a couple of things about him. I want to make sure that I get this out there. But as a professor, he kind of had this Jimmy Stewart cadence to him. He sounded like Jimmy Stewart, and I remember he would kind of roll the chalk back and forth in his hand, and he would just kind of do that was one thing. He would go and he would underline something on the board and he'd say, "I'm going to come back to that." And he never would come back to it. And then I remember him, one time in class, he would kind of always take his glasses off and play with them a little bit. And one time they fell to the ground, and he didn't make any notice of it. And he was continued lecturing, and he would just kind of step right over his glasses. And the whole class would just kind of be like, with every time he'd do it, I'm going to say with 2 minutes left in the class, he stepped right on him. And we all felt like so bad, like he must not have known that they had fallen. Picks them up, doesn't miss a beat, picks them up, looks at them, puts them on, and they're like, all over the place. And he was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to get some new glasses. So, but he was great for a whole host of reasons. But Bob Davis, you probably heard some stories about Bob Davis. He was great. He taught geography at the time, but he was a historian, kind of did political science and history and geography. He did it all.
Yeah.
Let's see. We talked about Dr. Ludani. My wife always thought he was a spy. Yeah, and she told him that once, and he said, "Well, it's funny you say that," because evidently he was riding his bicycle in Hungary one year, and he was pulled over, and they gave him the business, asked him all kinds of questions. But he would wear that black turtleneck, and, kind of walk around, and you didn't know, right?
A lot of people thought Dr. Smith from geography was a spy because he was more of a quiet personality, but he definitely had the look to him, and he taught an espionage class. So
yes, he would be popping in, popping out. You never knew what you were going to get out of Dave Smith. Let's see, who else? I remember. Let's see here, Dr. Crawford. I remember this is I'm spilling beans here, but I remember when we were hiring Dr. Crawford. And it wasn't him per se. It's just the whole process about it was the first hire that I think I had been here was to replace Dr. Moore. So it was the first job search that I was on the other side of it. And in a small department, to me, peace is priceless. Like you have to have colleagues that you like. You want to go in every single day and you want to enjoy these people. They don't have to be your best buddies or anything like that, but we are like a family, and that hasn't changed at all since I've been here. It's like family in the sense that you can get frustrated with one another, but don't let anybody else get frustrated with that person. We'll come to your defense, that kind of thing. And I remember talking to Dr. Lomax and saying, well, what if we find somebody that's just not the right person? Then we get rid of them, And I was like, okay. And but we were fortunate enough that Dr. Crawford was the one that we hired, and he's fit in like a glove. So.
Dr. Wilson talked a lot about keeping the kind of family aspect with this department, and that was really important to her when she was in charge of everything. So that makes a lot of sense.
She the line between history and political science or even geography, I mean, I think we all see ourselves as one and the same. There's not been a lot of kind of there's never been backstabbing since I've been here, unless it's happened, and I just don't know that it's happened. And that's huge. I mean, there's departments in graduate schools where not all faculty members are on the same floor. Like they literally separate them purposefully. The last job I was at in Frostburg years ago, they had like 3 faculty members in a different building because they didn't necessarily get along with the other faculty members. I can't imagine that being the case here. And frankly, I'd like to see more of that across the university, you know, where we're all kind of like in this together. I think oftentimes we are, but not all the time. So she's absolutely right. Like, you know, if we have an issue in the department, we talk about it and we kind of work through it. And there's a lot of dynamic personalities, there have been over the years, but everybody gets their say if that's what they to kind of get out there. And I don't know if we've ever moved forward without unanimity. We always are unanimous on whatever it is that we seek to do. So we'll work till we get there. And frankly, we haven't had to do a lot of that. So I'm trying to think anybody else.
Dr. Scott or anything?
Oh yeah, Dr. Scott. Of course, everybody was scared to death of Dr. Scott. You know, we had thought about setting some students up because, you know, she used to do the pen or nothing, pen or blood. And I don't know if you guys have that story or not, but she would tell students, if you don't have a pen for your test, then you better bring a razor, cut yourself open, and write it in blood, because that's the only other thing I would look at. So, and she would do this on the first day, and she had her attitude, you know, she was getting all scary, and so we talked about having a student go into that class, an upper division student, go into the intro class and say, oh hell, I'm getting out of here, I ain't taking this class, you know, because I'm sure that's what a lot of students probably thought about with her. But obviously her work with the mock trial team, that's when you think Joanne, you think mock trial. And she really built that program up. The criminal justice is another thing that she did. And, you know, she was kind of like one of those candies, right? Like hard on the outside, soft on the inside. And she definitely had her following of students that just would do anything for her. So, yeah, it's a shame that, you know, a couple years after you retire, you know, she got sick and passed away, and that was a big surprise to everybody. Let's see, what else? Dr. Scott, Dr. Waters, obviously, and I know that this was, somebody might have talked about this already, but my first week as the department chair, I was in Tampa at the Republican National Convention. So I was with a group of students. I'm at the convention, so I wasn't actually here. I actually even taped a little video message for the orientation class, so they, you know, welcome them. I felt bad about not being here. I want to do a good job as the chair and all that, and I'm not even there. I get this email essentially that Dr. Waters is in the hospital, and it was a work-related injury, and I'm like, what is going on? And it turns out that Dr. Waters was leaning on a lectern, and he slipped, and he busted his chin open, and blood was gushing everywhere, and so he ended up going to the hospital. So I am in contact. You know, how are you doing? Is everything okay? And he says, I'm gonna be all right. Unfortunately, those students can never not see that. He says, but I will make one observation that such things never happened under Dr. Ellen Wilson's watch. So he's pinned that on me for whatever reason. And then I remember thinking we had to replace the lectern, and they were giving me costs for the lectern, and I'm like, we can't afford to, you know, do that. I didn't know they were that expensive. Thanks a lot, Dr. Waters. And fortunately, one of the maintenance men was able to get the blood off and put it back together again.
You said it wasn't like the salt mines here.
And it's not like the salt
I don't
mines.
know.
So, no,
That kind of
yeah, that was work-related injury right there.
Did you have any memories of any specific students or?
Oh my God, you can't do that to me.
Anything like really stands out? Just a memory that.
Somewhere around here, I have this. Well, okay, I'll tell you a couple. So when we did the Electoral College survey, the very first one that we did, we brought in electors themselves, and they came to campus, and C-SPAN recorded the event, and it aired on election night back in 2004. It was a huge deal. ONU, little ONU is on the map, and I remember talking to the students in advance of that, saying, when we decided that this is what we wanted to do as Electoral College project, like, we can be the place to, you know, where people know about electors, and we have since become that place. And I just told him, think big. Ken Baker, our former president, told us, think big. I kind of took him up on that. And so to actually see these people that we were just like searching addresses down for at the Freed Center, you know, on television was phenomenal. And the students, they came into the classes, they taught in the classes, they did that kind of stuff. The electors did. The students were the ones that took them to lunch, dinner, that kind of stuff. So like they really got connected to these people. And the night that maybe the day after it aired, I remember coming, or no, the day after the event, I remember coming into class. And when I came into class, the students started clapping. And they all stood up, and I'm getting chills just kind of thinking about it, like, because they were just, it was really sweet to have that kind of a, that might have been even the same class. I don't know if that was the same class or not, but I've had classes where I remember Maggie Cuck, and I shouldn't talk about specific students because that'll get me in trouble. But I remember Maggie Cuck was from Grand Rapids, and she was talking about the Apple Butter Fest. And, you haven't had apple butter from Grand Rapids, and she went and got like tons of apple butter and brought it into the class, and they brought bread in, and their apple butter and their bread all over the class. So, election night parties and going with these students to conferences, and it's always about the students, So when you ask about memories, it's, there's been a lot of satisfying things that have occurred. The students make this the best job. It's not Ada, and so like so many good kids that, and this as a social studies person who's going to be out in the classroom, and this is the part that's rougher for you, is that like students now, like they know how to show their appreciation in a way that you don't necessarily, like when you're in grade school. I feel so bad for elementary school teachers. They do all that hard foundational work, and the kids don't really know to say, you changed my life, but they did. And so I have like I don't know if this is good or bad, but I have like a file that I have kept that I call my proof file, that you've made a difference. And so like if I get an email from a student, or if I get a card from a student or whatever, I'll put it in the proof file, just in case I'm having, a bad day or whatever. I haven't had to do that, frankly, in years. But I've got it somewhere, and students have been able to show their appreciation in lots of ways. It's great to see them on Facebook, and that kind of stuff later on down the line, to see what they've been able to accomplish and stay in touch with them on a more personal basis. It's a very rewarding job.
Out of everything that you've been through, and you as a student, as starting faculty, as leading the department, what is your favorite memory? Like one favorite memory that you could think of, best of all time.
Man, I mean, I think that it would be a compilation of the electoral college stuff. Has been pretty cool to kind of see all of that stuff, because there's so many different groups of students that have participated in that, and to see it go where it's gone, where CNN's looking for it, New York Times is looking for it, and all that kind of stuff, when a lot of publishers and whatnot were saying, and then it actually becomes something big. And I mean, there's literally scores of students that have their hand in that. That's maybe the most rewarding part of what I've been able to do in my time at ONU. It's very rewarding. As far as the favorite memory, it's hard to say. I mean, it's just kind of funny as you're talking about this, like it's kind of like a This Is Your Life, where you're thinking about, you're sitting there doing a debate about the need to go to semesters in front of your peers. Like, that's crazy. This electoral college event where C-SPAN's there, it's crazy. Going to Chicago with students and going to a conference and seeing them get up at 6:30 in the morning to go see Morris Fiorina give a presentation. Not because I'm forcing them to, but they want to see Morris Fiorina's give. I mean, are you kidding me? It's so sweet. I've had students at my house to watch lots of picnics and that kind of stuff for orientation and other things, and that's been crazy rewarding. I can't say one thing that's my greatest creme de la creme memory. Having those students kind of applaud when you walk in the door. Every day is not like that. That was definitely a special day. and kind of a big like punctuation to like a lot of other things that were going on at the time. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
All right. Well, thank you a lot for the interview. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, or anything that I didn't hit?
There's probably a million other stories I could be telling about this place. So yeah, probably not. I mean, you only have so much tape. So
Right.
digital. You only have so much digital.
Right.
So many bytes. All right.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.